Today, we are tackling something pretty significant. We're exploring the spiritual quest of new generations.
Right.
There's this seismic shift happening in faith. Our sources detail what is basically a mass exodus from traditional church structures.
A move into the wilderness, so to speak.
Exactly, a kind of spiritual wilderness defined by these very personalized, do-it-yourself belief systems.
That's it. And our mission today isn't just to, summarize a trend. We're really trying to analyze a deep tension.
A tension between what, exactly?
Well, on one side, you have this undeniable, vibrant hunger for genuine spirituality. Often, it's really centered on Jesus.
Okay.
But on the other side, there's this fundamental human need for community. And our source material really insists that true transformation happens with others. It just doesn't happen in isolation.
We have to start with the context here, because this isn't a small trend, it's a flood.
It really is.
I mean, the data on the collapse of trust in religious institutions, it's the clearest sign that this is a structural movement.
Not just anecdotal.
No. Get this, only 14% of Gen Z say they trust organized religion completely.
14%.
When you see numbers like that, you know this generation they're literally voting with their feet.
That statistic is the earthquake reading. It really shows you the scale of the dissatisfaction. It signals that the old frameworks, the structures that housed faith for centuries they're buckling.
It's not just about different music in the service or something.
No, not at all. It's a fundamental crisis of confidence in the institution itself.
Okay, so let's unpack the root causes.
Yeah.
Why is this exodus happening? The data suggests it's not just a recent thing with millennials.
Right. Our source material traces the start of this huge shift all the way back to around 1950.
Wow. And the reasons for leaving have kind of crystallized over the decades into, three main buckets?
That's right. Relevance, theology, and relationships.
The relevance one seems huge.
It is. People just feel the teachings have very little to do with their actual daily lives. Their jobs, modern moral questions.
And the theology bucket?
That's about fundamental disagreements. Things like human dignity or how you interpret ancient texts. But I think the relational bucket, that's the most corrosive.
What do you mean by that?
The perception of an unforgiving, narrow, or even an actively intolerant spirit within the very places that were supposed to be a home.
And what's so fascinating and honestly deeply problematic is how that intolerance creates a kind of spiritual feedback loop.
A feedback loop? How so?
Well, the source points out that an unforgiving spirit inevitably creates an equally intolerant counter-reaction from the outside. So the very structures meant to teach universal love
end up becoming factories for division.
Exactly. It just reinforces all the reasons people had for leaving in the first place.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But here's the paradox in all of this.
Go on.
The person they still cite most often as a spiritual guide, as the source of ethical insight, is still Jesus.
So they reject the container, but they keep the content.
Perfectly put. They're turning to Jesus as a mentor, a philosopher, a revolutionary. They just haven't figured out how to follow him without the institutional context they ran from.
This brings us to a perfect analogy that Jesus used himself. The wineskin's parable from Luke 5. It feels like it was made for this moment.
It absolutely does. Jesus was describing the tension between his own teaching, the new wine, and the existing religious structure, the old wineskins.
Right.
He knew that if you try to stuff this revolutionary, life-expanding spiritual experience into outdated, rigid containers,
those containers will just burst.
They'll burst, and you lose everything, the wine and the skins.
And he showed such a remarkable understanding of human psychology in that same parable.
Oh, yeah.
He didn't just warn about the bursting structures. He pointed out that people who are used to the old wine often prefer it. They say the old is good enough.
It really speaks to the enormous comfort that we find in tradition.
Even when that tradition isn't facilitating growth anymore.
It's resistance to change, to metamorphosis. It's hard. And if we connect that ancient idea to today, you see the core tension laid bare. Spirituality is intensely personal, right? It's that inward path attuning to the God within.
Okay.
But that inner spirit, that transformation, it has to be expressed outwardly in action toward other people. And the hard part is accepting that the outward action needs some kind of collective structure.
This is a great transition point, because when you reject that collective structure, when you go out into that spiritual wilderness, You face some pretty severe psychological consequences.
I do.
Our source material calls it spiritual limbo.
Spiritual limbo. It's basically perpetual exploration without any real commitment.
Yeah.
People who reject the institutions, they lack an anchor for their faith and identity.
So they're just relying on whatever resonates in the moment.
Exactly. And for Gen Z and millennials who are already under so much pressure, identity becomes this massive, constant project of construction and revision.
That sounds absolutely exhausting. You're constantly curating your own belief system, but never actually finding a spiritual home.
It is a psychological burden. The freedom of being unchained with infinite choices for, ethical systems, practices, communities. It often leads directly to choice paralysis.
I know that feeling.
The brain just gets fatigued trying to process all that information and all those potential paths.
It's like the spiritual version of trying to pick a movie on a streaming service with 10,000 options.
That's a perfect analogy.
Or standing in a massive library.
Yeah.
You spend so much energy looking at the choices that you never actually pick up the book you need.
Precisely. And in a spiritual context, that fatigue shows up as procrastination, putting off the deep work of faith and impulsivity, just bouncing from one belief to the next.
End result.
Chronic anxiety, deep regret over paths not taken, and critically, less satisfaction with whatever temporary choice you do make.
The source material focuses on this idea of identity diffusion, exploring beliefs without ever committing. But hang on, isn't that exploration necessary today to be authentic?
That is a challenging and vital question.
I mean, are we sure commitment isn't just a nostalgic word for conformity that we're trying to impose?
I think the sources suggest the answer is in understanding the consequences of being rootless. Commitment is only valuable if it leads to growth. But with no commitment, you run into two huge problems.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, life is experiential. If you spend all your time analyzing and exploring but never actually commit to a path, you're doing nothing. You get nothing from life's deepest experiences.
You're stuck at the starting line, just perpetually warming up.
Exactly. And the second, more profound problem is that this rootlessness spirals into existential dread.
That sounds serious.
It is. Without a guiding framework or a community to share the burden of finding meaning, people feel this deep anxiety about purpose, about mortality, about the meaning of existence itself.
The commitment gives you the framework to face those big questions, but together.
Together, that's the key.
It seems like today's generation is intuitively getting the ethical part of faith, though. The source notes, they've correctly landed on this new law of love.
They have.
They understand that harming others is the greatest wrong, and that loving others is the highest ideal.
They have absolutely nailed the what love others. That's the core of Jesus' teaching, but they're missing the critical how and the who.
How and who?
How do you sustain that love when you're suffering? And who holds you accountable to that high standard, that foundation? The delivery system for sustainable outward love is the ecclesia.
Let's define ecclesia, because this is crucial. It gets translated as church, but the original Greek literally means gathering or assembly.
Right. It was derived from the synagogue model, which was highly functional, but it was never meant to be this huge cathedral or some isolated, solitary structure.
So what was its function?
It was multifaceted. Of course, it was for communal worship and fellowship, but it was also designed for practical application.
Like what?
Like exploring what it means to truly love others in action, addressing local issues like poverty or injustice, and supporting local leadership. It was built to be a functioning local body, not a self-help program, for one.
And this is why the sources insist that community is non-negotiable.
It has to be.
If you try to be your own spiritual guide, the burden of being all-sufficient just leads to this profound loneliness. You're constantly having to justify your own identity and figure out absolute truth all by yourself.
And the ecclesia, the body of believers, is intended to be the physical reflection of God's love in the world. We are called to support each other through suffering and celebrate in good times.
So if you cut yourself off from the body,
You cut off the very support system you need to withstand the existential pressures of modern life.
So, if the massive impersonal old wineskins are proven failures, what do the emerging functional structures look like? Is there good news here?
There is. New things are growing in the wilderness. The source highlights the microchurch or dinner church models.
Dinner church, I like the sound of that.
It's a really promising trend. These are intentionally small gatherings, often centered around a shared meal.
So even though they're digital natives, they're choosing something very analog.
Exactly. They are actively prioritizing face-to-face, vulnerable interaction to fight the very isolation that digital life creates. Sharing a meal, it forces you to be present. It forces connection.
This is where that wilderness idea gets really powerful. The source suggests that Gen Z isn't failing. They're in a necessary metamorphosis. They're the wilderness generation.
Right. They're too busy rejecting the old structures to have fully built the new ones yet.
It's like the Israelites leaving Egypt.
That's the perfect parallel. They were focused only on rejecting the mindset of slavery, the rigidity, the control, that predictable but dehumanizing structure.
But that rejection left them wandering.
It did. They were wandering, sometimes even longing for the leeks and onions of Egypt, which is just a metaphor for the comfort of the old structure, even though it was bondage. Their wandering was a prerequisite for learning self-governance and how to trust each other.
And that's where this generation is now.
That's where they are.
So for those who want to lead or mentor this emerging faith, the shift they have to make is massive.
It's huge.
Young people are not looking for leaders who will fix their problems or preach rigid dogma at them.
No, they're seeking presence. They need mentors who will listen deeply, who will patiently hold space for their uncertainty.
So future leaders of the ecclesia have to value curiosity more than control.
Absolutely. That ability to just sit with doubt, to not offer quick answers, that's what will help people solidify their own faith and move past that identity diffusion we talked about.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, standing in this spiritual library of infinite choice? We've covered the Exodus, the psychological strain of going it alone,
Two paths.
the inward path.
The inward path is necessary, resonating with the divine within you, which leads to the clear understanding that harming or neglecting others is contrary to God's nature.
And the outward path is just as necessary.
Yes. Recognizing that the divine resides in all of us, and therefore we have to form a community, an ecclesia, to provide the structure, the accountability, and the shared burden we need to walk the hard road of faith together.
So faith isn't dying.
Not at all. It is shedding old skin to grow. It's becoming more personal, more challenging, and profoundly more diverse. Finding your true self in this new religious world is an act of brave, creative curation, but it has to be done in relationship with others.
So the concluding challenge we want to leave with you is this. Given the psychological cost of rootlessness and the documented human need for shared purpose, ask yourself, where are you defaulting to inaction because of choice paralysis?
And what specific, tangible step can you take this week to move from perpetual solitary exploration to committed action within a supportive, outward-focused community?
Remember the closing sentiment from our source that really sums up this entire journey, from the wilderness back to the gathering.
Our answer is God. God's answer is us. Together we make the world better.